Thank you everyone for joining today. Let's get started. If you do have a question during the presentation, please put it in the chat and we will answer them at the end as time allows. As a reminder, we will send you a link to the final recordings and presentation with helpful resource links after the session. Today, 108 Degrees Digital Marketing is presenting the Lead Generation Tactics, How Email Powers Your B2B Sales Funnel workshop led by Marianne Pfeiffer. Marianne is a marketing professional passionate about helping her clients reach their goals. She's the founder and principal of 108 Degrees, a women-owned and women-led agency with over 20 years of outstanding service to small businesses, nonprofits, and educational institutions. She is also a MailChimp Pro partner with over 25 years of experience in email marketing and the author of Precision Email: 7 Lessons in Engagement Strategy. Today, Marianne leads our sessions as your marketing strategist, helping answer the digital marketing and brand questions that will lead you to success. So take it away, Marianne.
Thank you very much, Lauren. And welcome, everybody. I'm excited to get you to understand as a sales professional or as a marketing professional how you can use email to generate leads for your organization. So today's presentation is mostly focused on the B2B service area. So if you are not B2B, some of these will apply to you, some of them won't. But definitely, if you are selling to other businesses, these are the tips and the strategies that you need to use in order to have success with your program. So I want to start first with why we should be using email for lead generation. You should always be closing, right? Like always be closing. So why email? We know that email is highly effective. We've all seen the statistics, the 36 to 1 for every dollar you spend, you will earn $36 back through your email. But more importantly, in a B2B space, email is used every single day. So if you are selling to a B2B audience, you don't know when they're going to be on a social media platform. You don't necessarily know when they're going to check their snail mail, and if they do. But if they're in business, they're checking their email daily. They're checking it on their computer. They're checking it on their phones, maybe even on their tablets. They can't function without email. So email is the most effective way to reach people in a business setting. Email also can be used to build trust. Think about when we're talking about email here, we're talking about permission-based email. And with permission-based email, you've asked for permission to appear into someone's inbox. And then you are showing up where they expect to see you, when they expect to see you, how they expect to see you. And that builds trust. You can also make sure that in email, but through preference management and asking questions, and some things we're going to talk about later, that the topics that you're sending to the email box are actually relevant to what the party who is the subscriber is interested in. So you're showing up in a place where they expect to see you with a message that's relevant for them, and that builds trust. When we think about the sales process, especially in B2B, the trust aspect of that is really, really critical. If I don't trust you, it doesn't matter how good your product is, I'm not going to believe you. So we really want to use the tools we can to establish trust early on in the sales cycle, because in the end, that's what really helps us reach our audiences most effectively. Finally, conversion. Email converts better. Why does email convert better than other methods? First of all, it uses the nurturing, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. It uses a nurturing process to nurture your relationship. Some prospects are going to come to you close to being ready to buy. They've already done a lot of research and they've whittled down their choices. There are others who are going to need a lot of time. And especially if what you sell is a really high value item, if it's tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, you really need to build a relationship with that prospect before they're going to trust you enough to become a customer. What's great about email is that it's not a hard sell. You're delivering to their inbox. They can unsubscribe at any time. They can reply at any time. They are in control of what happens. And because the prospect is in control of the process, they trust it more and they interact with it better. SMS can be great, but in some markets, it can seem a little pushy. And other tactics are not necessarily as effective at communicating, but email, it hits them exactly where they're working every single day. And when they're ready to receive the message, it's there for them. Now that we understand why we need to be using email, let's talk about how we create high converting lead magnets, because that is where the money is going to come from. Lead magnets are something that you go to a website or you download to collect information that you need as a subscriber, and that the sales team is going to be able to use to, qualify leads. So The first thing in creating a lead magnet is to understand what the pain points are for your buyer or your prospect. If you're in sales, let's go with the assumption that for most of you here today, that the sales process has been pretty well defined. You're not a brand new startup. You understand the buyer's journey. You understand the information they have to make a decision. Working with that assumption, when you create a lead magnet, you want to think about those early questions, those early pain points. Why are they looking for a solution like what you offer? What are the difficulties that they have right now? This works for products as well as for services because every buyer has a pain point. Otherwise, they wouldn't be buying. So you can use things like surveys, AI research, and even just feedback from the sales team to understand what are the topics that are going to resonate with my prospect. Once you understand what those are, you can then build in opt-in forms. And when I say opt-in forms, I mean not a big, long 27-point questionnaire that asks them their eye color and the names of their firstborn child, okay? We are looking for very, very simple opt-in forms. 3 questions or 5 questions. Oddly, not 4. Research has been done, and you can get 3 questions answered, or you can get 5 questions answered, and you get the same results. For some reason, when you ask 4 questions, the results drop off. Kind of weird. I don't know why. That's what the research says. So keep a simple form. 3 to 5 questions. What do you need to know? Well, you certainly need to know their name. You absolutely want to know what company they're with. And then, of course, you need to have their email address. That's the minimum. What are your other 2 questions? That really depends if you have different product lines, different possible interest areas, anything that will help you qualify the prospect, or more importantly, understand what kind of information they're most interested in so that you can provide them with what they would need most in their next aspect of the cycle. In your opt-in form or your opt-in landing page, make sure you're highlighting the benefits of this lead magnet that you're creating. Why is it going to be helpful for them? How is it going to help them with their pain points? How is it going to help them move forward in their buying process? Remember, in the B2B world, we're not buying things because we want to most of the time. We're buying things because we need them. We need a service or a product to do our jobs better, or to make our company more efficient, or to help our team do something better. So if I'm in a situation where I need to buy something, what are the benefits I'm going to get from your lead magnet that will help my buyer's journey or help my process? Now, another thing to think about with your opt-in form is, should you be using double opt-in? Maybe you should. If you're in Europe, absolutely you need to use it. You definitely want to do that because you have GDPR regulations. You need to make sure somebody should be double checking their you need to make sure that someone is actually opted in and has given permission to receive things. If you're in the United States, double opt-in is a little bit more negotiable. I suggest that in some industries where you might see a lot of spam or you might see a lot of low qualification parties, you may want to use that double opt-in because it will help to really qualify that prospect. However, if it's going to be a big obstacle, then you don't need to use it, at least not right away. If you find you're getting a lot of garbage email addresses in, then use the double opt-in. Then you're going to drive traffic to that lead magnet, right? So in step 1, we figured out what their pain points are. We developed some kind of content, some kind of creative that's going to help the buyer through their decision-making process. In the second part, we've created a form that gathers information that we really need in order to make sure that we can qualify this prospect. And we're going to highlight the benefits for them for this particular lead magnet. But now we've got to get people to it. So how do you get people to your lead magnet? Well, you can certainly use organic social media. And if in the B2B space, that's generally going to be LinkedIn. Now, it could also be Instagram. It could also be Facebook. It's probably not TikTok, at least not at this stage of the game. But certainly there are a lot of social media channels where if that's where your following is, use your social media organic following to drive traffic to that page. Also, paid ads. The great thing about LinkedIn paid ads is that you can really narrow your audience of who you're trying to target based on job function, based on company type, based on industry, the things that really help to pre-qualify a prospect to make it easier for you. So absolutely think about using your social media in paid and organic formats. Use your website calls to action. Somebody's already on your website. You don't want to lose the opportunity there to capture that lead. So use calls to action on your website to drive people to that lead magnet. If they're already interested, this is a great way to move them to that next stage of the buyer's journey. Also, don't assume that everyone in your database already knows everything that's in your lead magnet. If you've really dug in deep and created a really good lead magnet, and for many companies, there'll be more than one because there are different aspects to the purchasing process and buyer's journey. But think about sharing that with the qualified contacts, customers, prospects that you have, and partners. If you partner with other companies to provide services, your lead magnet might be really helpful to their customers as well. So share this throughout your network and drive people to that lead magnet to help them understand the journey and also help them understand what they can get from you that makes it worth them continuing the process. All right. So you've created this amazing piece of content or pieces of content, and you've got your forms and you're driving people to it. Now what happens? How are we going to use email? Right? I've collected their address. Now what happens? Well, don't assume that just because somebody downloaded your lead magnet, they read the whole thing and that they know everything about your system from there. That's not typically what happens. Typically, people will download it, they'll read it, some of it, they'll scan it, they'll look for immediate things, but they don't really know your business. They don't really know your products and services. They've just gotten a glossy overview. Or maybe with your lead magnet, you've taught them something to help them better recognize why they might need your services. But now we've got to take them to that next step. This is where automated nurture sequences come in. You're going to start to explain things. So the first thing I want you to do when you think about creating a nurturing sequence is think about how many times you need to talk to someone before they're ready to move to the next phase. Okay. This is very variable across industries. I've worked with some clients who it takes them 12 months to move a buyer from prospect status to ready to have a demo. I've worked with others where it's a 3-week process. It depends on your product, your services. But again, let's assume you're not a brand new company. Let's assume you have some kind of sales history to go from. You probably know roughly how long it takes a new prospect to make the decision about becoming a customer if you are the right choice for them. Think about that and map out what it looks like. Map out what it looks like if they're in their awareness stage, brand new, just trying to figure this stuff out, versus being in a more education or consideration phase of the buyer's journey. Understand where they are and how many steps it's going to take to talk to them and talk them through to the next stage. Now you're going to create value-driven content. Now you did this with the lead magnet, which was great, and maybe you can repurpose some of that in your email nurture sequence. But what you really want to do is you want to use this sequence to help them solve a challenge or to show and prove that you can do the thing they need you to do. Whether that's a product, whether that's a service, you want to use the sequence to introduce them to, if you have this challenge, here is what our solution is. Here's an example of someone who had a similar challenge, and here's what the solution we provided did for them. So this is the opportunity, once you've mapped out how long it takes, to look at the content you have and what new content you need to build in order to map it through the sequence process, the journey, to help people understand why you're the right solution. Now, I do want you to consider things that we call the buyer stage and the tolerance, right? So buyer stage is what we talked about, awareness, consideration, that buyer journey that they have. Where are they? When someone downloads the lead magnet, if it's the first thing they've ever downloaded from you, they're probably in an earlier stage. But if they download your lead magnet and they've already been talking to your sales team a little bit, they may be a little further along. So you're going to want to track those things, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. You're going to want to understand where they are in their journey so that you're giving them the right information in the nurture sequence. We want to stay top of mind. We don't want to bore them. What do I mean? We don't want to be in their inbox every single day. Well, for most things. It really, again, it's going to depend on your industry and your buyer cycle and a lot of other factors. But for most B2B sales, you probably don't want to be showing up in someone's inbox every single day, for 30 days straight. At a certain point, they're going to start to ignore you because they're not ready yet for all that information. But think about how many emails you can send them before you ask them to go to a demo, before you ask them to talk to a salesperson, before you invite them to a webinar. Okay. And understand the tolerance that they will have. Can you get them an email every 3 days? Could you send them 5 emails before they're going to say, this is just too much information and I'm not ready for it? Think about that and understand who your buyer is and what they need from you in their process. What's really important in this process in creating this nurture sequence is think about the calls to action that are going to drive them to take the next step. First of all, what is the next step? Depending on where they are in the sequence, what do you want them to know? Do you want them to sign up for a demo? Do you want them to download another lead magnet? Your buyer journey definitely depends on your product and your sales history, but the idea is that we should be using each of these emails to drive them to the next step, whatever that step is. Maybe it's learn more, maybe it's take an action, but give them an opportunity with every email in the nurture sequence to do something. Book a call, reply back for more information, ask for a sample, sign up for this, attend that. All right. So remember when I was talking about you need to know where they are, and maybe if they're first time in that you send them one thing, but if they're already in your database and they've talked to a salesperson, maybe you're sending them something else. This is about lead tracking. And for most salespeople, this is the most painful part of the process because nobody wants to sit there and fill out Salesforce forms all day, right? But it doesn't have to be too painful. When it comes to tracking leads, think about integrating your CRM with your ESP. Okay. You want to track things like, when did they sign up? Were they already in the system? Have they already received a lead magnet? Have they had a demo? And if you integrate your CRM with your ESP, you can actually customize that nurturing sequence based on the information you have about someone. So you can say, if there's nothing in the system for them, send them the first nurture sequence. But if they already exist, send them the second one. If they've already attended a webinar, send them the third one. Now, each one of those nurture sequences doesn't have to be completely different. They could have, some of the same pieces in all of them, but understanding what's relevant for your customer. If they've already had a demo with a salesperson, you probably don't want to send them the most basic information in their first email. You want to send them something that's a little bit further down the buyer journey. If your CRM allows for it, I also think you should consider lead scoring. So what lead scoring does is that when someone takes an action, for example, they download a lead magnet, they open and click in a campaign, they attend a webinar, they add points to the actual lead. So you can look at someone and say, well, if we add 5 points for everything and someone has 75 points, they've been interacting with our content for quite a while. So that helps to understand what you want to do next in the sales process and maybe which content you want to send them in your lead nurturing series as well. Certainly lead scoring is great for sales follow-up because if someone has been interacting with your content, they've been on your website, downloading articles, downloading lead magnets, clicking in a lot of things, taking a lot of actions, you can actually set flags in some CRMs that when someone's lead score hits a certain point, flag the sales rep to follow up. You've probably experienced this yourself, and maybe you just weren't aware of it, that that's what's going on. But that is what a lot of sales teams are using to help automate that lead follow-up process for the sales team. It's also really important for your email process that you're monitoring conversions, right? If you're trying to understand what in your email is working, you've got to track this in your CRM. You've got to know which emails are actually tracking to the leads that convert. You may not be able to tell exactly which email it was, but certainly you'll be able to tell which nurturing sequence it is, or maybe within a few creatives that really stand out as getting a strong response. To have a very successful lead nurturing program, you've got to know what's working. So you've got to be tracking things and you've got to be monitoring results. Now, if you really want to get great results, if you really want your sequence to work well, you need to think about segmentation and personalization. You have to think about what's important to the subscriber or to the prospect. It's not just about what information you want to send them. It's what information they need to make a decision. It's the crap that's important to them. So when we talk about segmentation, we want to look at things like engagement data. So again, we talked about which lead magnets did they download, which emails did they interact with. Understanding that helps you to understand what's important to them. You can also look at things just like demographics and psychographics, their industry, their company size, their role within the company, what types of purchases they're, when you're looking at somebody who's, say, a purchasing agent for a larger company, as opposed to a middle manager who's purchasing something for their team, it's a very different kind of segmentation. Purchasing managers are looking at very different things, and that you're probably up against maybe other RFPs or other software that's out there or other services that are out there. But if it's the manager for a small group, you might be the only thing they're considering. So understanding that and then sending the right message to the right person at the right time based on the data you know, that's called segmentation. And that ensures much better results. It also means that you may want to look at your nurturing sequence and you may want to have a couple of different versions, depending on the job title, depending on the level the person is at. Personalization is huge today. And personalization back in the dark ages was like, hi, first name. And hi, first name is great. Like, you should still use people's names. Definitely use people's names. They want to know. If they have filled out a lead magnet opt-in form and they have asked to receive information, they expect that you know who they are. And it's almost a little bit rude if you don't acknowledge that at some point in the email process, whether it's in the to field or whether it's in the dear first name, whatever it is, you definitely want to acknowledge that. But if that's the only thing you're doing for personalization, you're really missing out on the opportunities that exist to connect and build that trust with your prospect. Again, we know if we put things in the CRM, we've connected the CRM to the ESP, we know what they've downloaded. We know if they attended a webinar. We know if they've talked to a salesperson. Take that data and use it. Think about the nurturing sequence, the journey. Think about the information you put in front of them and base those decisions on what you already know. If they've already attended a webinar and you can see that, what's the follow-up from that webinar? That's where they are in the series, and make sure you recognize that. You can even say, hey, I know you attended this webinar. If you'd like to see the replay, here's the link. Acknowledge what they've done, recognize that you understand what they're going through in their buyer journey and that you're here to support that. And always test. And I probably say this in almost every single workshop that we have, always, always test. Because you don't know what you don't know, and until you test something, you don't know if it'll work. There's some companies, some organizations that we work with who have very well-tested content. They know the subject lines that work. They know the content that drives interaction. And that's fantastic. And we're happy to use that data. But it doesn't mean we never test anything. When things change, we test. When we think there's an opportunity for better engagement, more clicks, we test. And so should you. Because only if you're testing things will you really know which subject line is working better, which call to action gets more clicks, what timing is best. So make sure that you are testing this. And if you've already tested it, great. But maybe once or twice a year, test it again. See if things have changed. So, compliance and deliverability. This has become a very big topic in the last year, maybe even the last 2 years. Understanding how your email actually gets into the inbox is something that most marketers never really worried about back in 2023. We just assumed that if we were using a good ESP, our email landed in the inbox. But then we started to see things. We started to learn that if we didn't have certain technical setup right, it's not going to make it to the inbox, or it's going to be harder. And if we didn't have our technical setup exactly right, we might land in the spam folder. Then Google and Yahoo and Microsoft and all of these other providers started saying, hey, we need certain protocols in place, or we're not going to deliver your emails anywhere, not even to the spam folder. So compliance and deliverability have become very big topics for us. Also because, if you haven't noticed, there's been a proliferation of cold email. If you never got it before, you are surely by now getting email outreach from organizations that are saying, we'll sell you leads, we'll buy you lists, we will do this for you, we will do that for you. Cold email's out there, and it has been in the B2B space for a long time. But compliance and deliverability are now much more affected by it than they ever were before. So let's talk about delivering to the inbox. If you want to deliver to the inbox, cold email aside, you absolutely have to stay compliant. Now, compliant does a lot of things. So what does compliant mean? Compliant means it's a permission-based list. People have raised their hand and said, I would like to receive email from you. Okay? That the opt-in is clear, that the unsubscribe is clear, and that you are making sure that the subscriber's inbox is respected. And then deliverability, making sure that your list is clean. Listen, if somebody has been bouncing out of your box for a really long time and your ESP hasn't cleaned them out, but they haven't actually gotten anything from you in months, the odds are that email address isn't real anymore. So just get rid of it. Stop sending to people that don't want the information you're trying to send. You're never going to get anything from them anyway. Monitor your spam reports, monitor your abuse reports, understand what's bouncing and why, so that your deliverability can stay intact. And let's talk for a second about that cold email, because cold email isn't what it used to be. I always tell clients, I understand in B2B industries that cold email is kind of the way we've always done business, right? People don't pick up the phone anymore. So if you can't get through to somebody on the phone, and certainly you're not going to be sending snail mail if it's, a really scattered list and you don't really know where people are at, you have to use email. But how? You should, by all means, work with someone who understands cold email, understands how it works, understands deliverability, understands compliance, can put monitors and checks on your domain to make sure that when you are sending cold email, you're not violating any rules and that you're doing it in a way that's not going to harm your domain permanently. And most importantly, just don't buy random lists. These people that send you the email that says, I've got a list for your industry and it is guaranteed to produce. It is not, and it won't. And all it's going to do is harm your domain. So just don't do that. Put those guys in the same folder where you put the Nigerian prince, because that's about how useful they are. All right. It's also important to know that the rules are changing. I have a lot of clients who over the years have been using cold email very successfully. They have very targeted lists, and those lists are developed from, certain industry protocols and standards that completely make sense. But even in those cases where they know what they're doing and they know how to do it and they are following the rules to the best of their ability, it's getting harder and harder to get through. From firewalls to just general security issues, it's more and more frequent that we are seeing deliverability and compliance issues with cold email. You're risking your domain every single time. And this is why I say work with an expert, work with somebody who understands cold email. We do work with clients who have cold email because they're in the B2B industry, but we do it in a way that keeps them as compliant as possible. Understand that you're risking your domain and make sure it's really worth it. Most importantly, respect the inbox. If you do have to use cold email, don't send out tens of thousands of messages a day. And make sure that it's really easy for people to opt out if they're not interested. Do not send them multiple emails again and again and again. A couple of shots, ask them if they're interested, and then walk away. Make sure if you're sending cold email that you're monitoring your domain reputation, because if you're sending cold email and ignoring that, you might be cursing your whole domain. It will not only affect your emails that go out, it'll affect your website, it will affect your ESP and every email that goes out. So monitor your domain reputation. And if the expert you're working with says you need to stop cold email, then you need to stop cold email. This is why you want to work with somebody that understands these rules and understands how this works so that you don't get yourself into trouble that you can't get out of. Now you're going to create this nurture sequence or these other emails to follow up. And what you really want is engagement, right? We want to build trust. We build trust by building that engagement where they want to click, where they want to learn more, where they want to reply. So how do we do that? So the first piece is that you have to have great subject lines. Nobody's going to interact with an email that they never open. So using some of the behavioral science tactics like curiosity or urgency or stating benefits, use those tactics to drive people to open your email and actually want to see what's inside. Look at the past campaign metrics. Look at what has worked before. Sometimes speaking about the benefits works really great. Sometimes speaking about the pain works better. You have to decide based on your audience. And again, you may have more than one audience. You may have some people earlier in the buyer's journey, some people later, some people looking at one product or service type, others looking at another, and you may have different results from those different groups. Understand what works with different groups. Look at the metrics and then develop great subject lines and test. The only way you're going to know is to test. We talked about that already, but test those subject lines and understand what's going to work. If you want engagement, you need to give them a reason to click. What's a reason to click? There's a lot of reasons people might want to click. Maybe they want to read more information on your website. Maybe you have another download that would be interested to them. Maybe there's a webinar sign up. Maybe they want to get into a, one-to-one conversation with somebody from the product team to learn more. Typically, they're not super excited to talk to sales. We know that, but they'd love to talk to somebody on the product team. Can you provide education, resources, information, something to get them to engage so you can track that in your CRM? And when you track that in your CRM and they get some type of points-based system, you're going to see that interaction is working. The other thing to do that a lot of people don't think about is just Ask them a question, run a survey, run a poll, ask them what they're most interested in. If they're really interested in your products and services, they'll probably answer. And you can use that answer to tailor the next piece of information you send them or invite them to something. You can take that data and leverage it to create real and true engagement, which is what your subscriber's looking for. Test, test, test. Nothing should be one and done. Okay. You want to test. If it's new content, you absolutely want to test it for at least 30 days, maybe 90, depending on your list size and how much you're sending. And if you have established content that's working well, you should still be running tests at least once a year, maybe twice, depending on your seasonality. But test things and see what's working. You don't have to run as long of a test if it's proven content, but you should still test it regularly. So here's your action plan. What happens next? So your next steps from here is I want you to go back and create that high converting lead magnet, solve the customer problem, answer their questions, see where they are in their buyer's journey, and provide them with the next thing that will help them get over that pain point. Then you're going to use that lead magnet and an opt-in form to send people that nurturing sequence. Again, the nurturing sequence may reflect some of the information that was in that initial lead magnet, or it might take them down through the next steps. Take a look at your leads and segment. Create segments that make sense based on what you know about customers. Are they new? Are they coming back? What do they already have from you, and how can you leverage that to put them into the next stage of the buyer's journey? Create emails, follow-up emails that leverage segmentation and personalization based on what you know. And finally, make sure you're optimizing for engagement. Test and try different ways to get them to click, reply, or otherwise engage with you. If you'd like to learn more, and I know this was already a lot, and yet it was still a high-level overview, so there's definitely more we can talk about in some subsequent workshops. But if you'd like to learn more, here's some great articles. There's some from Forbes. This playbook is really interesting for B2B. MailChimp talks about lead generation. AI can be a really great tool for you. Just be careful how you use it. But for B2B, Marketing Profs has a great article. And then HubSpot can talk to you about as well some lead nurturing tips. So hopefully those are helpful to you. Those links will come out with the workshop if you've registered for it so that you can get that with the slides and check out those articles. And finally, our next workshop will be on Tuesday, September 23rd. It is on content planning and how content can fuel your email strategy. So I hope that you enjoyed this session, and I hope you'll join us next month.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about how to take your marketing to the next level, check out our YouTube channel with recordings from our past workshops and other highlights.